New week of the call up, and we are talking about our favorite minor league storylines of the season as the season winds down across every single level. Now it's just really postseason time, the very end, and that's it. But before that, also, Jackson Jobe, the number one pitching prospect in baseball, friend of the program, one of our favorite guests that we've had a couple times now on the show. He gets the call up to Detroit. It might just be for a couple appearances out of the bullpen. We'll talk about that, where he fits in, how that's all going to look, and maybe they can try to find a way to petition to get him on the postseason roster. I can't believe we're talking about that with the Tigers right now. Regardless, super exciting. Jack, you didn't really get a chance to see AAA Jobe, but now you're just going to see big league Jobe instead.
Which is fine by me. I'm totally cool with that. He got bumped up to AAA. I think it was, the week after we saw them in Toledo. So, no, it was actually while Indy was in Toledo. Jobe started, I want to say, on a Wednesday or Thursday. I think it was a Wednesday. And then on Thursday, it was announced that he was promoted to AAA. So he would have lined up for a Tuesday start. So we literally missed him by a game. So I didn't get to see him in triple. It's fine because I watch a lot of Jackson Jobe already. So it's, all right, I've already done this. I don't need to do it again. I'm really excited to see what this looks like in the big leagues this year. Next year, it is as a, mid-rotation to possible frontline starter with the stuff that he has. This year, you've got 6 games left. And there may not be a way to get him on the postseason roster like you're talking about. So how many times do we see him? Do we see him once for 5 innings? Do we see him twice for 2 innings? I'm fascinated to see how this breaks down.
I think it's probably going to be twice for a couple innings. I think it's just also good to have somebody that can go multiple innings the way that the staff, and I know this was something that Kristian Crespo, who I know follows the Tigers very closely, having worked there in the past, one of our amazing writers at justbaseball.com, he was talking about, just having somebody in the fold there to help the staff out because they've been pretty taxed. They've been throwing great, but they've been pretty taxed throughout, top to bottom there over the last week or so. So just having somebody that can come in for a couple innings and be able to do that, or, if it's games out of hand or you have a big lead, then maybe you could stretch him out of relief in 4 or 5 innings. Great opportunity for him to just get a taste of it as well and just get a feel for the big leagues to roll into next year. If he's not able to be on the postseason roster, generally how that works, right, is a team, if you add him to the 40-man, you can, even after the deadline, you can technically get a player added to the postseason roster. He could be eligible for the postseason roster if a player goes down. If a pitcher goes down, you can petition to Major League Baseball and the commissioner's office, and they'll usually, I think if it's very clear, like, hey, this pitcher went down, we need a pitcher to come up, they'll approve that, but that would require somebody going down, and you don't really root for that, and that's not why he got brought up anyways. So probably just going to see a couple appearances here, preserve that bullpen, preserve some of the arms that have been taxed pretty heavily. But what I'm excited about, what I can't help but think about, and if you haven't heard the Jackson Jobe interview that we most recently did, that was earlier in this season while he was rehabbing from the hamstring issue, I can't help but think about when we asked him about his spring training debut, his big league spring training opportunity there, where he comes out of the pen, something he doesn't normally do either. He just was really excited to be able to throw. It's just in a big league setting, even if it was spring training. And he talked about the adrenaline and how amped up he was. And, we pretty much just asked him, what the hell was that? You threw 102 and you were just absolutely overwhelming hitters. And he goes, yeah, I couldn't really help it. I was just so fired up. And I'm thinking about him now coming out of the pen in shorter spurts. This dude might touch 101 and flirt with 102 again. It's late in the season versus, spring training. So maybe not, but I don't know. I'm just thinking about this guy amped up. I'm expecting triple digits if it's a short spurt, and he can help them with the final couple games here to be a great option out of the pen.
No doubt. I'm expecting triple digits. My other thing is, you were in Lakeland, dude. You were in Lakeland and you were fired up to the point that you were hitting 102. I know the arm may be a little bit more taxed, but, Jobe by no means is nearing uncharted territories because he missed some time this year. So, you would assume he's still got a little bit of freshness there. And I could totally see a world this is totally different. You want to talk about spring training. This is the big leagues. This is a game that counts, and this is going to live on a stat sheet forever. Versus spring training, it's hey, if you get bombed, it's really hard to find that, in 6 months even. But I'm totally with you. I'm expecting 101, 102. I'm expecting some of the tightest sliders that you've seen in Major League Baseball this year. it's going to be insane, whatever we get. And I hope that it's like, hey, they go opener and then they go Jobe for 2 or 3, and then they can do that again over the weekend.
That would be a lot of fun. And just it gives them an opportunity. It gives Hinch the flexibility to be creative, which is awesome. And when he's on, he's going to be able to get just about anybody out. So it's just a matter of that. Yeah. The command has been a lot better over the last few starts in terms of just filling up the strike zone. It's been more just about execution at points where he hasn't been as efficient from a pitch count perspective. And those are that's like the last thing that we're looking at here. And that's more of a next year conversation because he can be a little inefficient in 1 to 2 inning spurts out of the pen. Of course, if he's going piggyback 4 or 5, even then though, you can get away with being a bit more inefficient. So that's really been the one thing that I think has been holding him back from achieving that ceiling to where we can say, okay, he's ready to go at the big league level as a starter and to be the guy that we expect him to be. But again, that's more of something that helps him turn the lineup over a third time or helps him go a 6th inning in an outing, whereas he's just been at times just kind of fighting through the 5 because of the inefficiency. Shouldn't be a problem out of the pen. He's been landing the fastball for a strike over his last 5 outings at about a 72% clip. He's been ripping the sliders as consistently as ever for a strike over the last few outings. And I wonder if that was something that they were waiting for. When they saw that the fastball and the slider were consistently landing for a strike, and again, the last few outings, it's been as consistent as it has all year with the slider, I think they said, okay, that's going to work. Let's get you up here. So I can't wait to see what it looks like. Of course, when he's on and he's got everything going, it's fastball, it's a cutter, it's a slider, and it's a changeup that has really, really come along as well. But man, he could just go fastball slider out there and really have hitters uncomfortable. What I love is he can also go to that fastball changeup as well and mix in the cutter so you can have him go multiple innings, not need to just put him out there against righties. It is worth noting that last time he threw was on the 20th. So as we're recording this on the 23rd, it was 86 pitches. I don't think he's going to throw in the next day or two as we're recording this on a Monday, the 23rd, unless it's a very short sprint. I don't know why you would want him to go on shorter rest. I'm interested to see how they go about that, but I'd imagine that it's probably sometime Wednesday, maybe Tuesday where he'll throw. I don't think they've said anything about that yet, but I don't see him throwing on Tuesday when it's only been 4 days since he went 86 pitches.
I would think Wednesday short, Saturday or Sunday short, if they are going to do the 2 thing. I could also see them extending him to 5 days rest and saying, hey, you're going to go 5 on Thursday. You are essentially going to be our Thursday starter after Brisky opens or after whoever opens for them. And I could totally see that where like, hey, you've got 6 games. You have the assortment of 5 that you were planning on using, and the 6th is not a repeat of your Tuesday starter. Instead, it's just Jackson freaking Jobe. Like, that might be the way. Now that I think about the schedule and knowing that he pitched on the 20th, it's very rare, and I don't know if he's done it yet at the professional level where he would be working on 4 days rest. Why would you make a guy's major league debut come when he's on 4 days rest? I understand the idea of, it just replaces his bullpen, whatever. It's his big league debut. If he threw 80-something pitches on, you said the 20th?
Yes.
21 was Saturday, 22 Sunday, 23 Monday, 24 Tuesday. That's 4 days rest if he threw on Wednesday. I think you give him Wednesday the 25th off, and you have him go long on Thursday, and you get 1 awesome appearance from him. Now that I think about that calendar.
That seems to make the most sense. But you could also go Thursday a little bit shorter and then another time later in the weekend. A little bit shorter if you wanted to. But
and
it
then
could be a play it by ear thing too. And I think they might be just simply playing it by ear, saying we can go either way, but we have a guy that gives us the option to do either, which is huge.
And in reality, man, like we talked about it, their rotation as it stands right now is Skubal, is Reese Olson building back up, and Kader Montero. It's kind of nice to just have this, whatever it looks like. And
Brant Herter erasure.
Yeah, I mean, he's been a long man, dude. Like he's appearing out of the pen for 5 innings, and it's great. Like don't get it twisted. Like Herter and Ty Madden, they have given them outings that are irreplaceable. Over the last month and a half of the season. But if they can get Jobe leveling up on that, like, listen, I've loved what Brant Herter has done since they started this hot stretch. I'd prefer to watch Jackson Jobe, and I'd prefer to send Jobe to the mound over Brant Herter.
Well, what I love is how many different looks now that they're giving you out of that bullpen, though. If you have some sort of piggyback of those two at some point too, like that's a really weird look for hitters. So it just gives Hinch so much more to work with here, and I'm really excited to see how he rolls out there. But again, I like we said, it probably won't be until later in the week. But I love that they got him up there anyways, right? Get those big league checks. Don't wait and make him just sit around there. I think they had to probably because the AAA season is over. I don't even know how that works.
Well,
But regardless, glad he's up there even when he may not throw yet. Get his feet wet, just be there for a few games.
Yeah.
So your first game is not the one where you're just getting there.
Yeah.
I think that's another side of it that'll be nice for him too. And just to be involved with the team, I think this really does give him a much, much higher, I think it almost makes it more likely than not that he makes this Tigers team out of camp.
Oh, I think so. I think that's a foregone conclusion now.
Yep.
That this just happened. I think he's a shoo-in, barring injury, to be on the opening day roster next year.
I agree.
I will say he's one of the 2 or 3 guys, pitchers or hitters in minor league baseball, where it's like, oh, he needs a little bit more work. Oh, he needs a couple more innings. Instead of sending him to the fall league, it's like, oh, just join our wild card chase. That's a little bit better. It's higher stress, but you're still going to get those innings after the AAA season concludes.
Which is odd. That's a great point too. Like he actually could use a few more innings anyways. So it's great from that lens too. And you're never going to send that guy back to the fall league. No. So another guy that I think it does increase his chances of potentially breaking camp just from what the decision looks like is Edgar Quero with the White Sox just being on the taxi squad. And there's a chance he might get activated. I forget that the taxi squad is still a thing. I don't even understand how that fully works.
It's essentially not real. We dealt with it too. And there were guys that had their contract selected, and there were guys that were recalled, and then there were other guys that were on the taxi squad for a day, and it essentially just turned into we're in a holding pattern. You're going to be added to the roster at some point. We just need to get through this one more day. Like there were, I think starting pitchers were the best example of that, where they were placed on the taxi squad, and then a guy went, and then that guy was either optioned or DFA'd, and then they were activated from the taxi squad. So I would assume we see another one of these young budding superstars for the Chicago White Sox be DFA'd to make room for Edgar Quero.
Yeah, and it's just kind of a wait, and we'll see what they do there. But another guy that could use more ABs, unfortunately missed the last couple of weeks with an injury, which really sucked because he was red hot. And we had talked about the swing adjustments that he had made, the things that looked so good in the box that really had tied in with a huge uptick in power and just overall consistency with his swing. And it was pretty hard to deny what he was doing, both in AA and in AAA. You could talk about Charlotte as a good hitter environment for sure, but the batted ball data was just so impressive with the adjustments that he's made, and the defense just continues to come along. And I talked about it with Elijah Evans of Future Sox and our social savant here for the call up. There's nothing but positive things said about Edgar Quero, the person, and in terms of the way that he approaches the game. And the glove could use a little bit more refinement, but not for a lack of work ethic or a lack of ability. I even think the ability is going to come along too. It's easy to forget how young he is. Yeah. But I think just having him there as the AAA season's over, again, is another opportunity for, it may not feel like the big leagues relative to other big league teams, but for a guy coming up from AAA, even the White Sox will feel like the big leagues. And so just to be able to have that opportunity to potentially work with a couple of the pitchers that may be there next year, just to be in the fold. It's another guy that I think with what he's already shown in the upper levels, with nobody really being in his way at the big league level, I think with a solid spring training, Quero is another one that I feel even more confident about. I already thought he could break camp. Feel even more confident about when he's getting this opportunity maybe to play a few games here at the end of the season.
Are you sure the White Sox feel like the big leagues? I don't know. I read that story in the Athletic saying that they essentially, their charter plane is like the Flintstones car. It sounds like they have to actually run it across the road themselves. They're what, in an Airbus something where
are they? I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's 15 years older than any other charter jet that any team gets.
Reinsdorf's just cutting cost on the. Yeah, I mean that's a good area to cut costs, right?
If you haven't, it sounds like you haven't read that Athletic article yet.
I haven't.
Ken Rosenthal and Britt Giroli co-wrote a essentially just crucifying Jerry Reinsdorf and how ownership has just failed the Chicago White Sox.
Well, that's not fair. Well, let's hear Jerry's perspective.
It's pretty fair. Jerry has no interest in putting his perspective out, it seems, although I don't know. I'd be curious to hear it. But I will say you got to go read that article. There's a lot in that article. It
I
packs a
mean,
punch.
it makes a lot of sense though. Like, that's an area to save money, I think. With the plane, who cares, right? Quality of the plane
Apparently,
there.
these guys care.
No, not that important. Not important. It's just an airplane. Who cares if it doesn't click on all cylinders?
It's just an airplane with fewer first class type seats and fewer essentially like there are some players that sit economy on the private jet, which like makes no sense. But hey, you know what? Godspeed, guys. I'm excited to see this, not because it's going to take ABs away from Corey Lee, because Corey Lee is deserving of every AB he gets, but like I am excited to see what Edgar Quero looks like blossoming with this young rotation. In all seriousness, Sean Burke has looked really sharp since coming up. Thorpe, I know, is out for the year, but I'm excited to see Quero next year work with Thorpe. I'm excited to see Quero work with Iriarte if he finds, those improvements that he needs to make this offseason. I'm excited to see him work with a Jonathan Cannon as well and an Estrini, whatever it may look like. I'm very excited to see Quero, the big league catcher, navigate the big leagues with a young pitching staff. And I know that he was doing it in Birmingham as well. And he had, arguably the best starting rotation in minor league baseball that he was working with. But it's different doing it at the big league level. And you're prepping for the best pitchers on the planet. And oh, by the way, you got to go get Noah Schultz ready for, the third start of his major league career against the Houston Astros. And you got to help that 6'9", toddler, essentially lefty, deal with Yordan Alvarez and Kyle Tucker. Like, I'm really excited to see that element of Edgar Quero's game, because again, like everything I've read about the makeup of Edgar Quero is very sharp.
And they need that. They absolutely need that in Chicago on the South Side right now. Just players that go about it the right way, that are building blocks for the future. And fans need that too. Like, it's going to take more than Edgar Quero to make people interested in this White Sox team. I understand that. But there's a lot of fans that still pay attention and are looking for any reason to want to get excited about this ball club. And the fact that you can bring up another player here that isn't like I hope he sticks. Yeah. It's not throwing it at the wall like an Oscar Colas and just hoping it works this time around. This is a guy that, look, you never know what can happen with players. Nothing's a guarantee. But this is a guy that you can confidently look at and say, this guy's going to be worth the patience if he isn't good right away. Yeah. Or he's going to also be really solid for us out of the gate. And I'm excited to see what his future entails. This is a building block. So I'm glad for White Sox fans that a building block is now up there. The system has gotten better. Some players have made some leaps throughout the system this year, Quero being one of them. Yeah. And it's just nice to kind of see some of those pieces matriculate up to the big leagues.
It's pretty easy to win fans back, dude. And you do it with excitement on field. And if that translates into wins, that's the best case scenario. And that's the easiest way to win fans back. But if you see promise with Edgar Quero and Colson Montgomery and Noah Schultz and Drew Thorpe, like, there are names, and you run into enough names. If you find 8 names that you can be excited about on a roster, chances are fans are going to get back into it and get involved again. And I mean, Edgar Quero's arrival, I think, marks that the White Sox are inching closer and closer to fans becoming somewhat invested again, because this was the gold standard of like what not to do in terms of fan investment this year.
Yeah, absolutely. So storylines, you got a bunch of them. I'm going to mix in a few as well, but it's easy to forget. Just, it's a long season. It was plenty of games, and there's so many things that we have talked about throughout the year on this show. Some of these may be rehashing some discussions that we had in the past, but I think some of them or most of them will be new or just going deeper on some things that we had just maybe touched the surface on. So it could just be an individual player's performance that came out of nowhere. It could be certain things like that. We're going to fly through them. We'll spend a little bit more time on some of the topics that are a bit more fascinating, but I'm excited to kind of walk through these.
Yeah, I mean, the first one that I've got for you here are the 2 Mathews. Like, and this is kind of what we're talking about here when it's, hey, what were the prevailing storylines of the 2024 minor league baseball season that are going to stick with us moving forward? And my thing is the emergence of the Mathews here is probably top of the list. And I'm talking Quinn and Zebby. They're not siblings. They're spelled different. Quinn has 1 T. Zebby has 2 T's like a normal person. But Quinn Mathews had a 200 strikeout season in the Cardinals system. And he worked his way from low A Palm Beach through high A Peoria, through double A Springfield to triple A Memphis. And that's where he finished. He went low A to triple A. Zebby Mathews, high A, double A, triple A, big leagues. And this guy went, 48 consecutive strikeouts without walking his first batter, and it took a promotion for him to walk his first batter in Double-A Wichita. The fact that both of these guys broke out in this way, and they did it in a way that you weren't expecting. You could never forecast a pitcher to have Zebby Mathews control, ever. You can also, after watching Quinn Mathews at Stanford last year, never forecast that guy was going to be a vert machine at 96, 97.
No.
Both of these guys were crazy.
I think Quinn Mathews is one of the craziest stories of the year. Just given the lore too, right? We always talk about the 140 plus pitches that he threw. A guy that's going to go day one almost will never throw that many pitches. And it's not to say that Quinn Mathews just said, oh, you know what? This is the end of my career here. No, he's still a 6th round pick. It wasn't like he was a nobody, but he also wasn't, a day one guy that I think just like an agent would have ran onto the field and pulled him off the mound himself if he knew he was throwing that many pitches. But I just, you don't really see an uptick like that, especially from a college lefty. No. He averaged 91.5 on his fastball at Stanford. And then he ticks all the way up to averaging 95 this year while throwing the most innings that he has thrown and climbing all of these levels. And it's not just that, it's just across the board, the stuff ticking up and how good the overall arsenal has become. The fact that his slider is now 86 and way sharper and way nastier. And then the changeup that he's always had continues to be that changeup at 81. These guys getting 13.5 miles per hour of separation from that changeup. You just don't see that. Zebby, I think insane still. And the fact that the command had always been really good, but never to the point where it gets elite. And the fact that he ticked up two notches himself while maintaining some of the best command in the minor leagues. And I think statistically the best command in the minor leagues. Those are both crazy stories. I think Quinn is as crazy as any, given the archetype that he was, which is just pitchability lefty. How often do you see a pitchability college lefty at 23 years old just back into, I won't say back in, he probably worked his ass off to get there, but just end up returning the next year, jumping 3-4 ticks. It's just, it's unheard of. And it's so fun to watch this guy throw because it's not just the 3-4 ticks. He's a vert machine, like you said, it's great characteristics too.
Right.
I think that had to be one of the most impressive stories of the year, but Zebby was a lot of fun too.
I mean, it's just crazy how it almost slaps you in the face. It's I was never expecting this. It was such a rare thing to see what Quinn Mathews just did. And frankly, I could never pluck another example of this kind of improvement from the top of my head. I don't even know if you can.
Not for a college guy. Crazy things will happen with you get a player from the DSL or complex and he's 18 and then he grows 4 inches and whatever. There's stories like that. And I wouldn't be able to pull it off the top of my head, but I'm sure somebody could. Right. But for a college, lefty that was there for several years, it doesn't have a story of maybe injury or something that was holding him back. It's just, hey, no, I found this and I unlocked this. That to me is a whole different beast. Even a Jonah Tong, which I think is also one of the best stories pitching wise this year because he's 6'1", 180-pound righty from Canada as a 7th round pick. Even Tong, who jumped multiple ticks this year too. I don't even know if his is as crazy, even though he is a high school guy, because at least in his case, he's still developing, and it was age 20 to 21, and he made a little bit of a mechanical change, and he hadn't really had that many innings, even at the amateur level, let alone the minor leagues at all. So it was one of those things where it's okay, he's just kind of growing into himself as a pitcher. The guy had barely thrown. Quinn Mathews, we had hundreds of collegiate innings. But I still think Jonah Tong has to be one of the crazier stories too. It's just a 6'1" righty. I think 6'1" might be generous with these Tim Lincecum shades of Lincecum mechanics here. And talk about a vert machine. This is the vert machine this year, doing what he's done with his fastball. And I really think he's 5'11". But doing what he's done with his fastball and his overall arsenal and the 2 breaking balls and mixing in this changeup now and having the year that he had, punching out 160 as a 20-year-old. He turned 21 in June in the Mets system. I think he's got to be one of the crazier stories too. But even then, I don't think anybody touches what we saw from Mathews, the left-handed Mathews.
I think there's only one guy that comes close to touching that. And Quinn Mathews finished number 1 in all of minor league baseball in strikeouts. Again, he got to 202 strikeouts. the guy that was second in minor league baseball in punch-outs this year, Matt Wilkinson, Tugboat Wilkinson in the Guardians organization. And like the legend of Tugboat is absolutely one of the top storylines of 2024. Matt Wilkinson in 24 starts between low A Lynchburg, high A Lake County, a 1.9 ERA and 118 and 2/3 innings. He K'd 174, walked 37. That's a whip better than Quinn Mathews at 0.91. And the batting average against 10 points under Quinn Mathews. Quinn at a 179 opponent batting average. Opponents hit a $169 against Tugboat. It's physically unassuming. In terms of stuff, it's unassuming. But this guy was one of the better pitchers in minor league baseball this year, and I don't know the rhyme or reason.
Weird angles. I mean, it just seems like it's weird angles and some run and ride, and he just makes it work. But the craziest part is, and I just the fact that his nickname is Tugboat, I think, is just what makes it 10 times better.
Enhances, no doubt.
But his secondary strike rate. This is the part that's the craziest to me. His strike rate on his slider and changeup was 50% this year.
So he just wasn't landing him.
He just wasn't landing him. He's going 62% fastball at 89.5 miles per hour.
Dude.
And he's just making it work. And he's filling the zone with the fastball, 72% strike rate. But this guy only walked 8% of batters. So he's not even landing the secondaries the way that he should. He's throwing an 89 to 91 mile per hour fastball that's more 89, 90. And he is carving through lineups and getting some of the lowest allowed exit velocities that you're going to see. And it's not like this is a 24-year-old polished lefty that's just picking apart younger competition. He's 21. Right. He's 21 years old and comes from JUCO ranks. Like it is pretty absurd what he has done. He's just one of those like break your brain kind of stories. I don't know if it's going to play at the upper levels. I don't know, but we are a minor league podcast also. And he has been one of the most dominant pitchers in the minor leagues. He's really fun to watch. And it was just cool to see the guy create funky angles from a 6'1", 280-pound frame and get guys out in the upper 80s, which also leads me to not as much of the fanfare type of guy, but I also think is a storyline for our agenda. And if we have any agenda on this podcast, I think it's for sub 90 throwers to succeed. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Sean Sullivan, man, I'm going to root for this guy every day of the week because I want him to go up to the big leagues and break brains. I always talk about how I don't understand how scouting scales, if you like look at them still, and if you look at like an index of like, oh, this is how scouts evaluate the 2080 scale for fastballs, and it's just by velocity. It's so antiquated at this point if you're judging fastballs off of velocity. And I think Sean Sullivan is the perfect example of that. And you responded to me about that because I was joking about Louis Varland, 80 grade fastball, right? Because it's upper 90s now. Like, no, there's upper 90s fastballs that play like a 50 to 55 grade pitch. Right. I'm sorry. And the other way around too, if it's upper 80s, is that a 20 fastball? Is Sean Sullivan's fastball a 20? No, it's not, because it somehow gets hitters off balance and they whiff a lot. 77% strike rate on his fastball, a 37% chase rate, and a 26% in-zone whiff rate. Just for reference, 21% is good in the levels that he pitched at this year. This guy averaged 87.5 miles per hour on his fastball and struck out 28.4% of batters and absolutely overpowered hitters. It wasn't just masking the fastball. Yeah. He threw this fastball 66% of the time, Jack. Yeah. Like, this is a guy that made 87 not just play, he made 87 dominate.
It's funny because the results would seem to indicate, like, you give all these data points for what happens when hitters see his fastball. You look at his fastball and it's 87 miles an hour, like you mentioned. But when you take results into account, I mean, what are you grading this fastball? Like, this is a 60 at least.
Yeah, it has to be.
It's an 87 mile an hour fastball that is at the very least a 60 grade fastball. And it is performing results wise like a 70 grade fastball.
Yes.
At 87 miles an hour.
Yes. 37% chase rate on a fastball is outlandish. Yeah. And the velocity, like off the bat on these pitches is so low. This guy struck out 125 batters and walked 15.
Man.
And also, Spokane's a pretty hitter-friendly environment, no?
I think so. That league in general is a very hitter-friendly league.
I think I can find that in a moment, but in the league in general. So even if he's not just throwing it home, there's a lot of ballparks out there that are quite easy to hit. And he's a fly ball pitcher. His worst outing this year, he had one outing where he gave up 6 earned runs. And even in that outing, he still gave him 6 innings and punched out 7.
Dude.
Like, this dude punched out 10 or more on 4 different occasions, including a 13 strikeout appearance to open up the year. He had back-to-back. He faced Eugene twice in a row, like back-to-back, before getting promoted to Double A.
The 2-start week, yeah.
And he goes in this 2 starts back-to-back, 10 innings, no runs, 5 hits, 1 walk, 20 Ks. Eugene never wants to see this guy again.
Mm-mm.
And by the way, it was more of the same in Double A. It wasn't quite as video game-ish, I don't think, but it was pretty darn close. And he closed out the year. If you include the postseason start that he gave them out there in Hartford, and Double A, this in his 8 starts, a 2.15 ERA. The strikeouts dropped a little bit, but still just continue to get guys out. So even if that fastball is playing like a 55, doesn't walk anybody, and the changeup is nasty. So I'm interested to see what this continues to look like. Maybe it catches up to him at altitude and at cores or whatever. But anytime a guy's making 87 play in the upper levels, that's one of my favorite storylines.
No doubt, man. Yeah, I mean, it's fascinating. And now I'm obviously going to take us to guys that throw in the upper 90s. I've got 2 more pitcher storylines because I feel like we've been like pitcher exclusive so far. We might as well just do pitchers and then hitters and then some teams to wrap. My next one is Jacob Misiorowski, the reliever. Like, that is something to monitor here. And it didn't happen until he got to AAA late. Jacob Misiorowski was more of the same in a bad way in AA Biloxi, and then, first couple of outings with AAA Nashville. I mean, first start with Nashville, I think he went 1 inning and allowed like 4 runs, and he didn't allow a hit. It was just like a bunch of walks, a couple hit by pitches. That was what he was doing. Then they moved to the pen, and there was like a legitimate shot that we were going to see him throwing the 8th inning, leading into Devin Williams throwing the 9th. I think we learned a lot about what Misiorowski could be for the Milwaukee Brewers this year. And he was somebody that I had as many questions about as there was in minor league baseball coming into this year. And I'm lucky that we got some questions answered when he got to AAA at the end of the year.
Yeah, I mean, it's just nice to see that, in these short spurts, he can lock in here and fill up the zone. It seems like where he started to run into trouble as a starter was when, he had to start mixing in the other secondaries and knew he had to try to change his looks, and a long inning could snowball on him. And, if you think about it statistically speaking, long guy, every time he goes down to the dugout and then back up again, there's a chance that those mechanics can just get a little bit out of sync. But when you're out there for 1 inning, you get yourself ready to go, you come straight out from the bullpen, and you empty the tank on that 1 inning and go. And it seemed like was a lot more conducive to success for him. And you look at the last 4 appearances out of the pen, I mean, it was pure domination. 8 strikeouts, 1 hit. Guy was sitting in the upper 90s, touching triple digits quite frequently, and throwing a lot more strikes. So what's nice is at the very least, you see a guy here that, okay, he can be one of the better high leverage arms in baseball if that's what the route they want to go. If they want to still keep trying him as a starter, we'll see that early next year maybe. But I think now you look at Misiorowski and say, hey, this could be a multi-inning reliever. This could be a guy that we use in a lot of different roles that could thrive there. So it was fun to see that, he can be better in that spot. Because you've seen guys with command issues. It's like, oh, we'll just move him to the bullpen. It doesn't always work. The command issues still plague them out of the gate. And, if you walk guys right out of the gate, you're still in trouble, and it's going to be even worse. So I think that was a positive here as well. And I don't know if I'm going to steal your thunder, but that does kind of lead me into Craig Yoho also, which I just think is a fantastic storyline in itself. Because, like, this guy on his team in Nashville and really climbed up quite quickly. And I'm probably not going to do the Yoho story justice in terms of his whole path, because it's pretty absurd. This guy in 2023 at Indiana threw 37 innings out of the pen. Like that was it. Like, that's all we saw. And it was fine. Like, he was pretty good. Like, he struck out a lot of guys, that's for sure. But it wasn't like he was, had this track record of pure domination. And it really was like an explosion for him at Indiana, where the strikeout rate just jumped off the charts for him. But that was it. Like, he had been battling through several different spots, if I'm not mistaken, throughout his his collegiate career. I believe a JUCO guy as well.
I know Houston, I think. Let me figure that out.
But I know his whole path is pretty absurd and a story that I'd love to dig deeper on. But this guy signed for $10,000 as a, I think, 6th round pick. But it was like one of those, okay, we're just going to take a guy that was, or 8th round pick, guy that was supposed to go a little bit later. We'll just give him $10,000 saved there. You know how the Brewers like to get creative with the draft and overslot other guys, and they do quite well with that. But their money-saving pick is going to end up being a high-leverage arm, Yoho, this season across high A, double A, and triple A, 0.94 ERA, 57 2/3 innings, 101 strikeouts, and it's the nastiest changeup. This is one I couldn't wait to talk to Griffin about right after that ball game. And he said, I've never seen anything like that. Yeah. I've never seen anything like that changeup. And he said that the whole team kind of echoed the same sentiment. They'd never really seen anything like that. And even the pitchers were kind of slow-moing the grip just to see, you know, what he does and how he does it there, because it's so unique. And it's that Devin Williams-esque, you know, release there. You have Yoho's backstory a little bit more. Like, I'm just so curious where he came from, because I think that in itself is one of the more ridiculous stories. I'm looking at from Indiana. You get a medical red shirt and had a Tommy John surgery, a knee issue, other stuff like that.
He started as a hitter at the University of Houston. He's from Indiana. He went to Fishers High School in Indiana, which is funny because I'm like a 10-minute drive from Fishers High School right now. Like, I'm in Fishers, Indiana, as we record here, but he's from Fishers, Indiana, and went to Houston as a position player. Like, the numbers, it was only like 15 ABs, but I think he was like 3 for 15 with 7 Ks at Houston, and it wasn't good. And then back-to-back medical redshirt seasons. Medical redshirt in 19, then 20. He was, you know, they played 15 games, 21 missed it with injury, 22 missed it with injury, 23 was essentially like freshman season all over again. And that's when he broke out in Indiana. He is pitching for the 2nd year in his life.
It's the craziest thing of all time.
It's crazy, but I like actually taking you into a guy that is throwing in earnest for the 2nd year in his life with Yoho, Paul Skenes, dude. Like, you know, we forget, I think, because it's been so well documented. Skenes is throwing full-time for the 2nd year in his career. The first time he did it was last year at LSU. The second time is this year. And the storyline that I want to take you into, like, Yoho's changeup is probably the best pitch in minor league baseball right now when it just comes to, like, in a vacuum. Paul Skenes got a splinker all of a sudden. That was a minor league storyline. He just found a splinker. And that was a minor league storyline that I think we forgot about because it was so early. But we saw it in spring training. It's like, what's he throwing? And then we saw it in AAA, and it's like, you have that now? Like, who are you, man? You were supposed to be a 2-pitch guy with a decent changeup that you flash as a 3rd pitch. We learned something about Paul Skenes this year. And I think that's a huge storyline here because that splinker has been arguably his bread and butter this year.
Yeah, it's unlocked everything. It's really just allowed everything to play up, because now he was more of a horizontal guy, right? Like, even the fastball gets run, the slider goes the other way off of that. And of course, you still got to respect 100 at the top, but it just creates a whole different dynamic to all 4 quadrants when you've got to respect now splinker at the bottom, 100 at the top, and you still have the east-west situation too. So it makes him impossible to game plan for. You just got to hope he makes a mistake and hope you don't miss it. So yeah, that splinker is, I think, the most impactful storyline, because that pitch we debuted in the minor leagues, or I guess in spring training, and then ends up being one of the best pitches in Major League Baseball. Yoho, by the way, just to tie a bow on that, he threw that changeup 43% of the time, and opponents hit 142 against it, which I think is crazy. But the fact that they had a 399 OPS against it is even crazier. 177 slug. So if you're lucky to get to it, you ain't doing anything with it. 4 extra base hits in the 127 plate appearances against that pitch.
That changeup is a blitz ball, and you think about what that means. Opponents slugged 177 and an OPS under 400. That means he wasn't putting people on base with that changeup either. He wasn't missing that much. Do you have the strike
70% strike rate?
Like, dude,
on a pitch that moves that much.
Yeah, it moves arm side more than any other pitch in minor league baseball, and I feel very confident in saying that.
Yes.
Like, aside from like Brent Honeywell's screwball this year in Indy and Oklahoma City, like Yoho is essentially throwing a screwball and he's landing it for a strike at a 70% clip.
at like 79 miles per hour, which is pretty hard for like
It's
a
hard.
screwball type pitch. And the slider, which he didn't land that consistently because it's too sweepy. I think he gets like it's like 40 plus inches of horizontal separation. So it's just ridiculous. But yeah, Skenes just finding that pitch and turning it into what it's been and having such a feel for it, like he told us on the show, where he can just kind of manipulate it,
Yeah.
is 100% one of the craziest storylines.
No doubt. We're going to get to the hitter storylines in a moment. We will take a quick break, though. The hitter storyline, I think, of the minor league baseball season comes down to two. I'm going to start by pitching one, and then I've got the other that's prepped as well. The breakout of the minor league baseball season has been Kristian Campbell of the Boston Red Sox. And I know you have some swing concerns. I know a lot of people have some swing concerns. I know that swing landed him on the injured list in Worcester a couple weeks ago. But, dude, there may not be a rhyme or reason right now. But Kristian Campbell, in 115 games in the minor leagues this year, slashed 330, 439, 558. That's a 997 OPS. This guy hit 4 homers in 45 games at Georgia Tech last year. He hit 20 homers this year between high A, double A, and triple A. Oh, by the way, he swiped 24 bags. I don't really get it, but wow, this was a breakout. And all of a sudden, you're sitting here saying, Vaughn Grissom, who? And a reminder that Vaughn Grissom was the return for the National League Cy Young Award winner this year in Chris Sale.
Oh, yeah. No, this is the offensive story. It's not just because of the fact that he came out of somewhat nowhere, like relative nowhere. This was one of the better seasons across several levels that we've seen in some time. Like, it just, from a guy that wasn't like a top flight pick. Yes, but there's questions about how this swing will translate and all that. But when we're talking about a minor league season right now, and the storylines within the season, what he did across every level and maintaining that again across every level, despite the unorthodox nature of his swing, he's just a special athlete and a special talent. So, I'm excited to see how he puts it all together to make that work at the highest level. But there's no way around it. Like, this guy's athleticism and just natural feel to find the barrel is hard to argue against. And when you slash 330, 439, 558 across three levels in a year where I don't think, if you asked the Red Sox before the season, they probably thought he'd finish at double A at best.
Yeah.
I don't would have thought any chance he's getting to triple A, and they probably would have thought that there's a good chance he sticks the whole year in high A. But not only does he get to triple, looks really solid there as well. Biggest surprise, and also just like some of the balls that he hit, like when he barrels them up, like, man, it's 114, 115 miles per hour, and you have no idea how when you look at his body. He's just a twitchy, explosive athlete.
Yeah. The only other guy that can come close to equaling the story star power of Kristian Campbell is Deyvison De Los Santos.
Yeah.
And this goes back to last offseason when all of a sudden Cleveland took him in the Rule 5 draft. And we're saying, this guy, really? Like, you think this can work in the big leagues? Spring training was hard, so they return him to Arizona. Spent 38 games in Double-A, then 49 games in Triple-A before the trade deadline. And you combine his numbers between Double and Triple-A, this guy, of course, led minor league baseball with 40 homers. He was the only 40-homer guy in minor league ball this year. He slashed 294, 343, 571, 25 doubles, 40 homers, 120 driven in between Double and Triple-A as a 21-year-old. He's the only one.
And the craziest part about this is, like, because of some of the concerns about, the underlying batted ball data as well, in terms, not even batted ball data, more just chase rates and the trajectory of where he's hitting a lot of these balls. He's now been in 3 organizations since the start of spring training. And this comes from Eli Sussman, who does a fantastic job for Fish on First, and it's at Real Eli, ELY on X. He said, if my research is correct, Deyvison De Los Santos is the first player in 69 years to win a minor league home run title while changing organizations midway through the season. Makes sense, because usually if a guy's on pace to win the minor league home run title, probably not changing hands, right? So that is a really crazy one. And I will venture to say that Eli's research is correct. He's as well researched as anybody I know out there. So that's pretty crazy. And to even add to it, He really was a part of 3 organizations in this calendar season, if you will. So that part is nuts. He's still so young to do what he did from a power perspective. I thought it was pretty cool. And I definitely think that's a fun story. 40 in the minors is no joke. And the fact that he finished it outside of the PCL to add a little validity to it, a little extra validity to it, I think is a cool touch too.
Yeah, it's Amarillo and Reno though, so 0 validity to that. It's essentially like he hit 17 homers this year.
If you adjust, it's about 17.
Yeah, this play had a catch probability of that kind of.
What's funny is he actually was just as good outside of Reno as he was in Reno. So he kind of proved that he's gonna hit it out of any ballpark. There's no question about that. It's just how consistent can he be?
And dude, some of these distances and EVs that he's put up in Jacksonville at this point, I see Scott Kornberg throw him on his Instagram story, the announcer for Jacksonville, who does a tremendous job. But dude, it's 470 something in Jacksonville. You're in Florida, right, dude? It's not supposed to go that far in Florida.
Crazy. He's got some crazy juice.
Crazy. My last kind of marquee hitter story, I clumped 2 guys together, and it's the lower level mashers, one of which has turned into an upper level guy now. I clumped Bryce Eldridge in San Francisco and Laz Montes in Seattle into the same boat, because these are 2 guys that are 19 that look like they're 40 with full beards that hit the living crap out of the ball. And the Giants are fast tracking Eldridge quicker than the Mariners are fast tracking Montes. And I mean, really fast tracking Eldridge. But both of those guys, I think there were pretty lofty expectations from you, especially, but both of us coming into the season, and they both exceeded lofty expectations.
Which is rare for the big power hitting swing and miss, concern type of archetype. So to see that, I mean, yeah, these 2 monstrous teenagers that are showing the polish as well is pretty absurd. I think Eldridge getting the AAA and then also now being sent to the fall league, reportedly, has to be one of the craziest storylines. Clearly, the Giants with the fall league as the final piece there, clearly they want this guy up there ASAP. But Laz Montes, I think what he has done as well, is a guy that had some pretty concerning underlying whiff in rookie ball. And then to do what he has done now in full season ball and just get better and better and better and handle these aggressive assignments relative to most players you see of that archetype is pretty absurd. Like you said, Montes was pushed aggressively, and Eldridge is, if that, I don't even know what word to use after considering the fact that Montes was still pushed aggressively. So extremely aggressive push for Eldridge, and he's been able to handle it, and it's been quite impressive as well. I thought one more on the higher profile name storylines, just because it happened so quick that kind of quickly could be forgotten, is what Jacob Wilson did. Yes, he's a top 10 pick. Yes, I get that. But especially relative to what I was expecting. And I knew he'd make contact, but I didn't know if he was going to be able to make it all work in terms of being productive. And even knowing that he'd make contact, did I know it was going to be 96% in zone contact type of numbers? No. I mean, we're talking 92% overall contact rate in 52 minor league games this year, predominantly, or most of them at the upper levels or at AAA. That's absurd. A 92% overall contact rate is better than 99% of the in-zone contact rates in minor league baseball. Right. So doing that, this guy hit 433 in those games. 433 in 52 games is outrageous. So that side of it, just seeing him basically be the Luis Arias of the minor leagues and maybe even better than that, relatively speaking, is absurd. And that's got to be a big storyline, because he's now in the big leagues after dealing with a little bit of the hamstring thing, and looks like he's another building block for this A's team that continues to look better and better.
Of course. I have one more individual before I get to 3 teams to conclude my storylines. The individual is one that we haven't brought up yet this year, and I just want to key you into this story. Have you seen the name Payton Eeles in the Twins system yet?
I don't think so.
EELES. I'm going to give you the 411 on him, and I want you to look at some of the data points and tell me if this ascension makes any sense. Payton Eeles is 24 years old. 5'5", 180 is the listed height and weight. This guy looks like a fire hydrant, like a strong lower half, but he's 5'5", and he looks the part. He spent 4 years at Cedarville University in Ohio, which I think is D2. I don't think it's NAIA. I think it's a D2. He transferred to Coastal for his last year. So he played 4 years at Cedarville. He used his COVID year in 23 with Coastal Carolina. 63 games, hit 374 with a 992 OPS. He swiped 42 bags in 63 games. But he's 5'5". He spent 4 years at D2. He does not go drafted. So he goes to Indie Ball, plays with the Chicago Dogs in the American Association, and is pretty good. 2024 rolls around. He signs with Southern Maryland in the Atlantic League. I think the Blue Crabs played 6 games, hit 3 homers, swiped 2 bags. Twins sign him. Assign him to Low A Fort Myers, 24-year-old. 34 games, hit 331 with a 965 OPS. Then goes to Cedar Rapids, 13 games in 898 OPS in those 13 games. Then goes to AAA St. Paul, 64 games, slashes 299, 419, 500. That's a 919 OPS, 20 for 23 in the stolen base department. Like, this guy just made himself a possible big leaguer when he's 5'5", played 4 years of D2 ball, and was undrafted and played parts of 2 seasons in indie ball.
And he's been good in AAA. Like, he just had a series against you guys in Indy, right?
It's so, yeah. And like, he's not necessarily like a game wrecker, but you notice his presence in every single game. And that's really hard to do at the minor league level. There are very few guys where it's like, I felt your presence every day this week. And Eeles is one of those guys. And it's like, how do you run into balls as hard as this? He's really good defensively, either at second base. He can play a fine shortstop too. It just like this type of story proves that baseball is a meritocracy more than any other. This guy was a Chicago Dog last year and had like a mid-800s OPS. And now he's one of the best hitters in AAA for the Minnesota Twins.
That's why I love baseball too, and minor league baseball too, because you're just going to find a couple of these stories every single year. We talked about, I mean, like, remember Vin Timpanelli with the Reds, who was found in a men's league, just throwing fuzz all of a sudden, and had some really nice stretches as a reliever. Eeles, dude, he hit a ball 430 feet off Trey Shupak, right?
Yeah, Shupak.
I'm actually really proud I got that one.
Yeah.
I remembered that one. But like, yeah, I mean, these are the stories that I absolutely love in minor league baseball. Remember Michael Stefanik, like, who had to beg for basically a tryout or an opportunity. And one of my favorite interviews that we had on here way back too, where, I mean, they finally were like, hey, we just need a body at the complex. And he's like, all I need, shows up, the guy just grinds and keeps hitting. And all of a sudden now Michael Stefanik has a fair amount of big league service time under his belt, and he made it. And this kind of reminds me a little bit of the Stefanik story in a way. And hopefully he gets a similar opportunity at the big league level.
Yeah, no doubt. I've got 3 teams. Do you have any other individual hitters?
Hitters, nothing that I think is like really, really worth its own, full-fledged story. There's a bunch of guys that perform that I'm excited about, and we'll do that on another episode. When we talk about just like performers of the year. The only other thing that I think is a fun storyline that I do think is important is Dalton Rushing, the outfielder, because the conversation, and I can't tell you how many mailbags we had about this too. And the better that Dalton Rushing continued to play, the more this became a question and a topic of conversation in the Dodgers, organization. Is, with Will Smith up there, who's had a rough year, by the way, too. And so maybe there's a scenario where where Rushing's going to play left at the big league level, but maybe they want to get Will Smith out of the crouch a couple more days a week. We'll see how they go about that. Remember, the DH spot won't be as clogged up consistently when Ohtani is pitching a little bit. But the question kept being like, okay, are they going to move Rushing? Is he a trade chip? They extended Will Smith. He ain't going anywhere for a long time. But I think it got to the point where the Dodgers were just so enamored with Rushing, just the player and the way he goes about his business, that they're like, we can't trade this guy. This bat is too good too, and the glove has actually come along, and just a good guy to have in the org. So the fact that they're playing him in left late in this year, and the Dodgers aren't really a team that's like going to totally experiment with that, because they got a bunch of guys at every spot. Yeah. So they're not usually in the business of just moving a catcher out there to the outfield and seeing how it goes. But I think one side of it, that's just how impressive Rushing has been. The other side of it is, I think it's shows you how high they are on him and how he can fit into a role for them as soon as next year. It's interesting to note that he actually caught in 3 of the final 4 games of the season too. I don't know why that was, but I mean, he was playing almost exclusively left down the stretch there and ended up getting to play like 30 games almost, I think, in left field. So that's a fun wrinkle in this thing because now we have a clear path to him getting big league ABs next year. And it gives them some versatility there of a guy that could catch, play left. And I think now you can really count on having a chance to break camp next year too. So seeing Rushing get an opportunity in the outfield, I think was a really cool and important storyline in this whole thing too.
I'm with you. And that kind of blossomed in September. This one, I think we really, came to terms with in May or so. And this is the first of like 3 teams that I have, but this is really built around 2 individuals. The Tigers aced the first round in 2023. They aced their first 2 picks. And I think we realized that this year when they both got to high A in Max Clark and Kevin McGonigal. That was something that I think we were curious how it was going to shake out. It's not like Clark set the world on fire last year. I know you were really excited about Kevin McGonigal, but all of a sudden we come into this year and they both hit the ground running like that. McGonigal was arguably the best player in low A before the call up to high A West Michigan. And Clark somehow leveled up in West Michigan after playing pretty well and really heating up at the end of his low A stint. Like, there was just something about those 2 guys that validated what Scott Harris did last year that got me really excited. And I kept revisiting that throughout the year, I feel like.
Yeah, just seeing these guys perform together, as much as, you want to turn the page, and we always talk about that where it's like, just, hey, you made the pick and roll with that. There's always going to be this kind of check-in of, okay, well, how are the 2 guys that they pretty much got instead of Langford doing? But just seeing them perform in lockstep too. And it's been even, I think if you could pick which guy, this might sound a little crazy, but if you could pick which guy would be a little bit better offensively, I think out of the gate, I would honestly pick McGonigal because McGonigal needs to hit. He's a second baseman that may fill in a little bit of short, but he has to hit. Max Clark has been good. McGonigal has been great. And I think that's exactly how you want it because Clark is going to get better offensively. But Clark is a tooled out machine of like, he can throw the ball mid-90s from the outfield. He's a 70 runner. Like, that there's going to be a little bit more juice in there. Like, that's a guy that doesn't fully need to be an 850 OPS guy to be an above average regular. Whereas McGonigal, like, it's going to need to be above 800 to be, I think an above average regular. So to have McGonigal just be the guy, I think, offensively in this organization. And then Clark not far behind, but then also showing all the other tools as well. And seeing that bat continue to come along. I think you couldn't have asked for a much better season from both of those guys. And having them kind of climb in lockstep is really cool. And all of a sudden now you can dream on a timeline where they can get up there, and be there ready to go full time for the 2026 season. But, I wouldn't rule out a couple guys, these 2 guys, maybe really pushing their way up there and getting to the upper levels pretty quickly by the end of next year. So I think you got to be really excited about what's going on with those 2. I think that is a great storyline.
Do you think they both start next year in Erie, or do you think they go back to high A for a minute?
I think they go back to high A just to start the year. And then if they're going crazy, it'll be a quicker push, but I still think they probably start there.
Yeah. 2 more teams. We just discussed this one. The Phillies, like, their organizational resurgence is absolutely a storyline here. And the fact that they dealt Klassen and Aldegari, and they still have an Eduardo Tait and a Starlin Caba and an Aiden Miller. And, oh, by the way, Andrew Painter is working his way back. Like, there are so many guys now. And all of a sudden, the top of the Phillies system, I said this is the best the Phillies system has looked in a decade. But, I mean, like, at the top, if you factored in Klassen and Aldegari to the rankings that you just did, I think you'd probably walk away from that episode saying, like, is this a top 5 system in baseball?
It's definitely in the top 10. And I think, with Justin Crawford in there, even though I have my questions, like, he's producing and he's tooled up and he's still a good player. Like, the depth that they now have. Yeah. I mean, you definitely can look at that and say, hey, this is creeping up in the top 5 if they don't subtract Aldegari and Klassen in there too. So, yeah, I mean, that's another one where you have a team that's performing at the highest level. You have some buying moves, but nothing crazy, but still you subtract it from that farm and it's still better than it's been, in a long time. 100% is a storyline. And I'm interested to see, if they cash in on any of those pieces, maybe in the offseason, or if we just continue to see Dombrowski, which he's done, has been an underrated aspect of him, is build up this farm system. And I think the negative side has been how he tears it down, but you got to be able to build something to tear it down. And it seems like he's been a little bit more measured here with what pieces he subtracts, and the more pieces that you add and build, and the more depth that you have, the more you can subtract from the second tier guys and not really feel it. And that seems to be exactly what Dombrowski started to do. So I think that the Phillies just farm system, scouting, and player development in general, I think you're seeing a difference here, and that has to be the story.
Yeah. Last but not least, the Tampa Bay Rays are the wagon of minor league baseball again.
Yeah,
and
they're back.
All of a sudden it looked like their farm system ticked down. And now I look at the strength and numbers that they have at like each level on the ladder. I mean, triple, like in the big leagues, let's take that for example. Junior Caminero, that guy's pretty awesome. Hunter Biggie like actually looks like a closer now. He just got his first big league save this weekend. Hunter Biggie was piece number 2 of that Christopher Morel trade, or of that Isaac Paredes deal, pardon. Morel was piece number 1. Biggie's number 2. He looks like a real closer. Ty Johnson, did you check in on him at all when he got to Bowling Green? He was the third piece of that deal. Ty Johnson, 23 innings in Bowling Green, 39 Ks and 4 walks, 2 runs. Come on, man. And then just going like level by level here. AAA, Ian Seymour is there. Great. AA, dude, Carson Williams, Xavier Isaac, Braden Taylor, Chandler Simpson with 100 bags. Certainly an individual storyline of this minor league season. Trey Morgan, Dominic Keegan, Yoho Quero is there. Trevor Martin is there. Then you go to high A, dude. Aiden Smith is there. Dylan Lesko. How about Brody Hopkins? How about Jackson Bowmeister? How about Mac Horvath? How about Colton Ledbetter? Homer Bush? There are so many freaking guys, not to mention Gary Gill Hill out of nowhere.
Insane this year. Gary Gill Hill's been crazy. Crazy.
There are so many names, top-end talent, and the depth in this organization. The Rays, all of a sudden, at the end of the 2024 season, I think we're talking about as the best farm system in Major League Baseball.
Well, if there was one criticism, it was probably the arms going into this year, which felt weird with the Rays, but that was what the feeling was, right? Gary Gill Hill didn't really break out yet. So when you were looking at the pitching situation, you remember when we did the Rays system going into the year, it was Santiago Suarez, Yaniel Quero,
Mason Montgomery, right?
Yeah, it's like, yeah, okay. And then some other like exciting, maybe projectable pieces. But compared with what they did, being able to add all the guys that you mentioned that are high upside and fun, but then also seeing the leap of a Gary Gill Hill, to see just even a Trevor Martin look like he can be a solid depth arm, but just all of the pieces that they add. It's not just because, the Rays, we're going to praise it. Like, no, I mean, look at the numbers and look at the stuff. You can't argue against Brody Hopkins. Jackson Bowmeister immediately looked like a different arm. They tinkered with his usage a little bit and a couple of different release things, and all of a sudden looks much, much better. And he already had that solid baseline. Like even Owen Wild has been quite good this year. Like, and I love what they've been able to do here. And I think they nailed every single trade to add to what they've already had. And Yaniel Quero has been as nasty as anybody when he's on. And Lesko, you hope they can get him right, but that's just another fun name. It's like just the whole side of that too, where their biggest weakness probably was pitching for once. And now all of a sudden looks like they're loaded in that department. And then, we don't need to tell you about all the same bats, like Carson Williams making a leap into, being, I think, a top 10, 15 prospect in baseball, seeing what Xavier Isaac did offensively to just continue to solidify things. And I think the story of Chandler Simpson, and that should have been, I had that in my mind and I forgot about it.
Yeah.
That has to be a storyline for multiple reasons. One is the fact that he literally, I think, is proving in real time that he is a big leaguer. Like, I think there's questions and people are like, oh, well, maybe he's going to be this like pinch runner type and maybe a fourth outfielder at best. And even anytime I post Chandler Simpson stuff, I notice that people will be like, oh, but that's not going to work at the big league level. Like he doesn't hit the ball hard enough. A lot of those infield singles will be outs or whatever it may be. A lot of those infield singles will be outs. I agree with that with a lot of speedy guys that get that end up kind of picking up some hits. But these guys aren't running to first base at like a 3.5, which is basically what I think I had realistically. I think I had Simpson with some of the video I was watching trying to time it. I think I had him over there like a 3.7 some of these times to first base. I saw him get to second, from home to second on a little bloop double. in, I believe, less than 8 seconds. And there's just some weird things that he does. I think it's going to be that outlier. I don't know if I told this stat before, but I know I tweeted it and I talked about it. Chandler Simpson had just 22 batted balls this season that traveled more than 300 feet in the air. All 22 of those resulted in an out. On balls that traveled less than 300 feet in the air, Chandler Simpson hit 414 with a 449 slug. There's outliers to anything you're used to. And yes, some of those will be gobbled up as outs with better defenders, but he's still going to beat out a vast majority of those. I don't think there's anybody as fast as him that wields a baseball bat at any level of the sport, whether it be amateur, international, anywhere. I don't think that there's anybody faster than him that plays the 90-foot game with 60-foot 6-inch mound. He's the fastest. So I just think seeing that continue to show itself in real time, I'm buying on the JP comps. Like this is Juan Pierre reincarnated.
I love that. That's what we got, man.
Yeah, I'm trying to, like, before we wrapped up, let us know, like, in the YouTube comments or tweet at us what some of your favorite storylines were. Obviously, we would have missed some. And
sure.
Sticking to the Rays point, Dominic Keegan looks like he's going to be a starting catcher, like just solidifying himself too. There's so many things. Trey Morgan throughout that whole system. We could go on all day. Seems like everything you would want to happen in that system pretty much happened this year.
Yes.
But yeah, let us know in the comments on YouTube or tweet at us at the Call Up Pod. Let us know what storylines, what you think should have been mentioned in here as well, because there's so many things throughout the entire minor leagues.
Yeah, Mo Baller is certainly something that we're going to get comments about. Moises Ballesteros.
Getting to AAA so young, hitting the way that he had, absolutely
and then
very exciting.
Payton Dana's awesome year in AA too.
Yeah, he's back. He was back there now, right, to finish the year. But yeah, that was a fun one as well. But that'll do it for this episode. We will have another farm system this week. I'm hoping it'll be D-backs. I think I should be done with the D-backs at sometime this week, and another fun episode on the way. So look out for that. As always, thank you for listening. Look forward to talking prospects with you later this week.